Welcome to this session where our focus is literature, language, and culture. So today, our interest is to look at the nexus between literature, language, and culture. So we often see language merely as a tool for communication, but as Ngugi wa Thiong'o argues, language is actually a carrier of culture. Yeah, literature and language are carriers of culture. So literature in turn acts as the mirror, the critique, and the memory of that culture, shaped and transmitted by the chosen language. So in this session, we will move beyond celebrating African literature simply as a collection of stories, or literature as a merely collection of stories, but interrogate the political act of language choice and how coloniality warps self-perception and study the tension between modern and traditional African identities. But basically, I want to say that there is a nexus between literature, language, and culture. So because in this unit, our focus is to look at how literature intersects with different levels of knowledge, or different types of knowledge. That literature is not just about stories, but it intersects with very many aspects of our lives. So what's the nexus between literature and culture? What's the nexus between literature and culture? So that is our focus. So what are our ELOs? Critically evaluate Ngugi wa Thiong'o's argument in Decolonizing the Mind that the choice of language in African literature is a political act that either reinforces linguistic imperialism or reclaims an indigenous cultural identity. So Ngugi argues that by taking the language away from the African people, it was a kind of ploy to eradicate their culture. Of course, we will go into detail and then assess Chinua Achebe's thesis, the hybrid thesis. Chinua Achebe also argues about the use of English language in African literature. Then examine how Ocol Bitek, Song of Lawino, uses the persona of Lawino to satirize the cultural self, the cultural to satirize the cultural assimilationist tendencies of Ocol, and then discuss how Song of Lawino integrates elements of African orality, the use of proverbs, repetitive structure, and conversational tone to demonstrate literature's primary function as a vehicle for transmitting cultural values and resisting intellectual dominance of Eurocentric models. So this is the picture of Ngugi wa Thiong'o, whose contribution in African literature is notable. He was an indomitable voice in African literature, and may God rest his soul. God rest his soul in peace. Of course, he passed on last year after making a great impact on African literature. So let's begin with Decolonizing the Mind. And so in this book, Ngugi makes a number of conclusions or observations on the nexus between language and culture. That one, language is a cultural bomb. So this is the most damaging tool of colonialism because it works by destroying the collective memory and historical consciousness of the colonized people. Ngugi contends that while the bullet was a means for physical subjugation, language was used for spiritual subjugation. But the colonists used what? Used the bullet for physical oppression. But to oppress people spiritually, he took the language away. Because by taking the language away, language is the means through which people are able to attain their spiritual fulfillment. It is a medium through which people connect to their spirituality. And once it was taken away, their spirituality was subjugated. Number two, language and culture are inseparable. According to Ngugi, language and culture are an integrated whole. He asserts that language Yeah, language is a culture and is therefore a collective memory bank of our people's experience and history. Yeah, it is through language that our history is expressed. It is through language that our culture is expressed. Whether you're talking about a song, we're talking about prayer, it is through language, yeah, that these aspects are expressed. And so when the language is taken away, then prayer is taken away, then spirituality is taken away, then history is taken away. So language is the genesis and transmission medium for the entire body of values. Yeah, it is through language that values, aesthetics, and social relationships are transmitted from one generation to another. Yeah, and he talks about linguistic imperialism and economic control. So the choice of language is fundamentally political and economic. Ngugi argues that the linguistic imperialism is the crucial second step, yeah, after military and the political subjugation, yeah, designed to sustain neo-colonial economic control. So by creating an educated elite, fluent only in the colonial language, the imperial power ensures that this elite remains detached, yeah, from the masses. So when the people, when the leaders speak another language which is different from the people's, then you are able to create a disconnect, yeah, between the leaders and the people, yeah. And this is what he actually brings out in most of his works, like a grain, not a grain of wheat, a petals of blood, and devil on the cross, yeah, and the devil on the cross. Like in devil on the cross, it shows that the elite are actually the creation of the colonialist to perpetuate colonial heritage. And after the masses had killed and crucified the devil, who is the colonist, the educated elite come and remove the devil from the cross, yeah, remove the devil from the cross. So this kind of alienation, yeah, is necessitated by language. When the people speak a very different language from the leaders, then that alienation necessitates, yeah, neocolonialism in the new nations. Another tenet that comes out very clearly in this book is the reclaiming of indigenous African languages. Yeah, the core of his solution is the re-embrace and revitalization of African languages as the primary medium for literature, education, and cultural expression. Ngugi's radical decision to write his creative works exclusively in Kikuyu was a physical and symbolic act of resistance. Yeah, he argues that he cannot again write, yeah, to his or her, to his people in in English. Yeah, because through that, then he will be alienating himself. And so by going back to writing mother tongue and then translating the English, yeah, it's an act of resistance. It's an act of resistance to try and reclaim cultural expression, reclaim cultural expression. Writing for a national popular audience, another tenet. Yeah. So African literature, according to Ngugi, must turn away from being a literature consumed primarily by a foreign elite and a Western local bourgeoisie. Yeah. So the new literature must be accessible to the broad national audience. Yeah, that speaks the indigenous languages. So this literature, rooted in the values and struggles of the people, serves as a revolutionary function. According to Ngugi, literature should actually contribute to the revolutionary struggle of the African people. Just like Fanon says that Africa has suffered slavery and colonialism, and African literature must therefore resuscitate the self-esteem of the African people. Yeah, must resuscitate the self-esteem of African people and contribute to Africa's revolutionary struggle. And so, literature written in indigenous languages speaks to the heart of the people directly, and therefore contributes to the revolutionary struggle of the people. Then Chinua Achebe, yeah, came up with a hybrid thesis, yeah, that English is still important, that European languages are still important in African literature. And this is the picture of Chinua Achebe. So according to Achebe, he said the African writer and English language, we need a pragmatic approach towards the use of language in African literature. And so for Achebe, the African writer should appropriate English language for expression. That we need to still continue using European languages for creativity or for literary expression. But, Achebe is against native speaker competence, that the African writer should Africanize the English language, should take possession of the English language and refashion it to suit a new purpose. We need to do some mimicry, because according to Baba, mimicry is also a site for resistance, So he asserts that English must be altered to suit its new African surroundings, and made to carry the weight of the African experience. So this is not a passive acceptance of native speaker competence, but an active linguistic and creative rebellion. And that's why we are calling it mimicry. We try to mimic. A mimic is not necessarily obedience. When you mimic in a way, you are also resisting. You may be mocking. You may be mocking the person you are imitating. So it's some kind of imitation. So it's also a site of resistance. Then number two, Achebe talks about the tool for national unity and communication, that European languages are tools for unity and communication. That history has already affected Africa and new languages have been established. And so now that you have been given the new languages, these new languages, English and French and even Portuguese, have enabled communication among African nations. In fact, he says that Africa has more than 2,000 languages. So writing literature in vernacular, how long will it take to translate? Or how many years will it take for African people to learn these 2,000 languages to be able to enjoy literature? And so the main focus should be using European languages to enable communication among, African states, and then access to a global audience. That the European languages have enabled access, to a global audience. For example, his novel Things Fall Apart was translated into 30 European languages. So the colonizer is able to read even our works. But Ngugi says, we need to look at the cultural aspect, that this so-called global audience comes with very many other issues like cultural alienation. But Achebe does not see it that way. Achebe does not see it that way, rejecting native speaker mimicry. So Achebe stresses that we do not need to acquire a native speaker competence. For that native speaker competence, stands out as the major cause, as one of the major causes of cultural alienation. So attempt to be an insider will destroy the distinctiveness, and cultural flavor of the African voice. So it's against that kind of native speaker mimicry. So then we need to have activity 2. So compare Achebe and Ngugi's thesis in the use of language in African literature and point out the most appropriate trajectory for the African literature. Make a presentation to the class. So in the next class, the two of you or the three of you will make a presentation after reading Achebe's thesis, after reading Ngugi's essentialist thesis, and then you give us an appropriate trajectory for African literature, which is the way to go. Do you agree with the Ngugi that actually use of traditional or use of European languages causes alienation? Or you agree with Achebe that is only native speaker mimicry that may cause cultural alienation, but European languages are just okay? So we need a proposition from you about the best way forward, by comparing the two theses. So let's now look at the impact of foreign languages or foreign values in Okot Bitek's Song of Lawino. So Okot mostly use black aesthetics as the theory for his work. Although some scholars argue that Okot Bitek was actually a negritude poet, because it's like he he saw colonialism, and you know, he saw colonialism and its effects like new language and education, as among the major causes of what? The major causes of cultural alienation in Africa. Cultural alienation in Africa. Just give me 1 minute. Yes. So Okot Bibitek was more of a negative poet, and so we discovered that Ngugi's tenets, about language and culture come out very clearly in Song of Lawino and Song of Ocol. The poem can be read as a dramatic demonstration of Ngugi's major tenets. For example, the effect of the cultural bomb, the effect of the cultural bomb. Ngugi argues that the colonial education system acts as a cultural bomb designed to destroy a people's collective self-perception. So this is embodied in Ocol, and we know constantly laments that Ocol has lost his head in the forest of books, that as they read Western books, our intellectuals, they do change, There is that element of cultural alienation. The literature they read from the West, the books they read from the West, because of the English language, there is that Anglicization, Anglicization of Ocol and modern intellectuals. And then the inseparability of language and culture, that these things cannot be, So we see Lawino employing Acholi proverbs, vivid oral imagery, and the traditional song form, to articulate her defense. And when we look at Ocol, we see the elements of African culture because of the kind of orality. Orality is an element of African culture. It's an element of African culture. So our ability to understand Ocol's abstract Europeanized speech on politics and religion highlights the schism between their two worldviews, proving that the choice of language creates two distinct, incompatible cultures. So there is a new culture which has affected Ocol, and there is the old culture which Lawino still practices. Then reclaiming orality and indigenous forms. So while Bitek published Song of Lawino in English, a point of disagreement with Ngugi's later stance, the poem's form adheres to Ngugi's idea of reclaiming indigenous aesthetic. And also, you discover that actually this book was actually written in vernacular and then later translated into English. So you can see that actually Song of Lawina and Song of Ocol takes Ngugi's theorization about language and culture. So this adoption of an indigenous form complete with repetition, direct address, and conversational tone. It shows that the literature is rooted in the popular, communal, rather than purely academic foreign literacy models. Then satire on the assimilated elite. Yeah. So Ngugi is called for literature to be vigilant and critical of post-colonial elite is realized through Lawino's voice. So Lawino functions as the people's consciousness, using sharp satire to expose the absurdity and shallowness of the assimilated bourgeoisie, so Ocol and Clementine. Look at the way Clementine is presented. That her lips are red hot. Her lips are red hot. Like what? Like a billy goat that has dipped its mouth in blood. The image of the billy goat reinforces the sarcasm, reinforces the sarcasm. The image of the billy goat reinforces the sarcasm in this particular poem. The writer is being sarcastic to attack, Western cultures. So the writer is resisting. The book is a symbol of resistance against Western what? Against Western attributes, against Western attributes, against Western attributes. So this is one book that shows the clash between the two cultures, and it also takes Ngugi's theorization because it was written in Acholi and then translated into English to reclaim, indigenous, flavor and vision that Ngugi theorizes about. So that's what I wanted to share today. There's an assignment there that I've given, and let's continue. Let's continue attending classes and covering the content week by week, because we don't have time, and if we skip classes, we'll be unable to cover the syllabus. So if you have any question, you can ask on the group, or you can ask me directly, and thank you for attending the class.